Hello, everyone. I'm Deidre Desir, special contributor to business publications and DSM magazine, and I want to welcome you to our fall Lifting the Veil series called Life Interrupted, which looks at mental health effects of the pandemic and the multiple disruptions of 2020. Today, we will be looking at parenting in the pandemic, and we have a great program in store for you. But first, I want to share a little bit about this series. DSM Magazine has long been committed to the health and well-being of our community. And for 4 years, this publication called Lifting the Veil to highlight the issue and reduce the stigma of mental health. Last year, they added an event. This year, when the pandemic hit, we quickly realized there was a need to shine a light on how this situation will have short and long-term impact on the community. And we expanded the event series. The spring events were so well received that we added even more to meet the needs of the community. That's where we are this fall, looking at the continued stress of the pandemic. It's designed to provide concrete tools for each and every one of you all listening. Before we start, I'd like to thank just a few groups. First off, thanks to the DSM team who worked tirelessly to create and execute this series, from concept to the stories to finding experts, from designing slides and promoting the program. Thank you, thank you, thank you to the DSM team. You all are top notch, and you're showing that you truly care and are invested in our community. I also want to thank the sponsors who made this event possible. Our presenting sponsor, Delta Dental of Iowa. Supporting sponsor, Clive Behavioral Health and Mercy One. Sustaining sponsors, Employee and Family Resources, Make It Okay, MidHealth of Iowa Foundation, Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center, and NCMEC. I especially want to go back to our presenting sponsor and thank you again, Delta Dental. For more than 50 years, you all have been improving the health and smiles of Iowans. Delta Dental provides dental and vision benefits to more than 1.2 million Iowans. Most recently, Delta Dental and its foundation committed up to $10.5 million in COVID relief funds to Iowa dentists for claims advances, as well as grants for nonprofits. And since 2002, Delta Dental has invested more than $42 million to improve the oral health and overall health of Iowans. And so now I am pleased to introduce Suzanne Heckenleibel, Executive Director of Delta Dental of Iowa Foundation. Suzanne.
Thanks, Deidre, and good afternoon. I appreciate that intro, and certainly as a company, an Iowa-based company and a non-for-profit organization here, that we give back to the communities we serve. And certainly in regards to the time that we have experienced in 2020 and the work that we believe is so very important in regards to the COVID relief efforts, as well as, unfortunately, derecho recovery and relief efforts as well. And, from a perspective of an organization, we this fall also added an additional commitment of $10 million in regards to those recovery and relief efforts. So through for the 2020 year, it's been a difficult time, and one that we want to be and ensure that we are helping. Certainly from a perspective of wellness, the importance of physical and emotional well-being. This is why we've sponsored the Lifting the Veil series, and we believe that the important messages from today's session and the next two are so very important. So thank you again for joining, and I'll turn it back to you, Deidre.
Thank you, Suzanne. So this is how this program is going to work. Today, again, we're focusing on parenting in the midst of a pandemic. And I want to introduce our expert guests. They are here to not only share from their expertise, but also answer your questions. Our experts will have a chance to answer one question and discuss tools and techniques to help our viewers. We'll take several questions from you all, repeating the same format. I'm now pleased to introduce our special expert guests. first, Brianna Young, licensed mental health counselor. Brianna is a supervisor of Mercy One Psychiatric Residency Clinic at Mercy One Medical Center right here in Des Moines. Brianna has a licensed mental health counselor, or she has been a licensed mental health counselor for over 8 years and specializes in adolescent and young adult issues. So very key to this issue. Our next expert is Dr. Kelly Hill. Dr. Kelly Hill is a director of clinical services for children and adult clinical staff at Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center and is a licensed child and adolescent psychologist practicing for more than 20 years. She holds a doctoral degree in clinical psychology and provides therapy and psychological assessments to toddlers through adolescents, parents, and families. Again, key to this issue. And last but not least, Lindsay Brown. She's a minister of vitality and outreach at Plymouth Church in Des Moines. She has been a pastor for over a decade and has, in that capacity, she has worked regularly with children and families. I want you all to just give some snaps to our guests today. Again, thank you all for joining us. We have our first question. Our first question is coming from Tony Dickinson. Let's hear Tony's question.
Hello, I have a question. I'm a business leader. I'm working from home. I'm a dad. I'm teaching 5th grade science. I'm coaching flag football with the mask on. I come home and we're battling for internet bandwidth. How do I help myself and my family deal with all of this change?
Thank you, Tony, for submitting your question to us. I'm going to repeat it and you see it on your screen there. How do I help myself and my family with all of the changes happening around us? Ladies, I'm going to start with you first, Kelly. What's your response to Tony? Because he's not the only one that has this challenge. And I'm sure most people maybe haven't even asked themselves a question. They probably have said, how can I help my family? But they haven't included themselves in this question. Oh, we're going to unmute you real quick here, Kelly. All panelists, go ahead and unmute yourselves because we're going to have a discussion and walk through this together.
Okay, I was just saying, I think that's an excellent question. And I think you're right, something that we've all struggled with throughout this time. And I think if people focus on, this is really a time to get back to basics. This is a time to focus on what we have control over, because there are so many things beyond our control right now. So focusing on staying active, getting outside, eating healthy, getting good sleep, and trying, there's things changing, again, that are beyond our control all the time. So if we can focus on developing our new schedule, what this looks like right now, developing a schedule, making things as predictable as possible for ourselves and our children. Children do very well with structure, so trying to make things, the things that we can control, making those predictable. So keeping our good nighttime routines, reading the book, tucking them in, having these nice predictable moments when so many other things are, seem a little chaotic and out of our control. So making those sometimes in our family and our schedules to be predictable, and they know what's coming, in those certain times is the best thing that we can do right now, making those rituals.
Yeah, I like how you say get back to basics. And I know sometimes, things are all up in the air and people are confused on how they even create structure. How do they get to a space to create structure? Brianna, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Kelly hit the nail right on the head. Schedules, that's a big, giant, important word. Even for those that tend to run by the seat of their pants, schedules are so important in their own right, particularly for the kids, but even for the adults. It helps to set the basics, set the standards, sets boundaries. Everyone knows what's expected on a written schedule. We start to get a verbal schedule and things kind of go awry on that. So as much as you can do for your family, even for yourself, is creating that schedule. If you have kids that are home all day long, helping set a schedule that's written down so they can visualize it. Kids tend to do much better visualizing schedules than being told, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. And so having that written place where everybody can go, everybody knows the expectation, but also keep in mind, I mean, kind of like the question presented was, you know, we have everybody fighting for bandwidth. I mean, many individual households, you have people fighting for the bathroom. That may or may not be a new problem, but being home all day long, your schedules are different than maybe they were before you were home all day long for those that have online or even hybrid learning schedules. So even scheduling something like this one gets the bathroom from 8 to 9, the other from 9 to 10.
Scheduling bathroom visits.
But scheduling it, if you have to just kind of, again, like Kelly said, back to the basics, scheduling out things that you would never imagine you'd have to schedule out, write them down. It sets the baseline expectation. You know how to follow through because whatever the schedule says is what we do unless there's a bigger issue. And then you just make sure you're communicating that with one another so that folks are aware that changes are approaching.
So what you're saying is we're going to have to end up creating structures that did not necessarily happen before, because some people just flock to, oh, I'm going to get back to my normal schedule.
Yeah.
The schedule you're creating is not going to be a normal one.
Correct. And chaos, that when chaos surrounds us, or when you feel like life's out of control, the best way to feel like you're back into control and relieve that anxiety, even relieve some of the depression and the stress of feeling like it's all on you, is creating opportunities for others to understand what you need and what's going on without actually having to say it out loud 10 times a day, 15 times a day, however many times you got a kiddo or a significant other asking you what's going on today.
So Lindsay, you've worked with, oh, I'm sorry. What, did you have something, Kelly?
I was just going to say, I think being as proactive at that as possible, but sometimes it does have to be reactionary. Like if you notice there's a problem with the bathroom and people fighting over it, then you have to do a schedule for that. And I was just thinking in my own life, I have an online learner and then a hybrid learner, and then I'm working from home. And so we realized very quickly that we had to set up a schedule for our lunchtime because we didn't all have lunch at the same time. And if we tried to make lunch while my online learner was in school, right by the kitchen, that was very disruptive. So we had to actually make a schedule like, okay, this is when you're going to go into the kitchen. This is when you're going to go into the kitchen. So it seems silly, but it was necessary to make things flow in a way that wasn't disruptive for other people.
Did it work?
Yes, it is working.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
that's part.
So, Lindsay, you work with families alongside the children. How do you persuade a child to go into this form of using a schedule? How do you get buy-in that this is something that we need to do for all of us?
I mean, I think that when there may be resistance at the beginning, but when a child, I think children really seek what the boundaries are, and they will push past them if they aren't there. But when they know that they are there, they know that those boundaries are there to keep them safe, and everybody feels better when they know when they're going to be able to get their work done, when they know when they're going to get rest, when they know how they're going to get love and attention and appreciation. And so having those schedules, I think, really helps. And I don't have a quick tactic to convince a child, but I think you show them. You don't have to tell them, you show them how it works, and they learn through that experience.
So I want to go back to another part of Tony's question, which is the myself component. How do I create space for myself? And Dr. Hill, I want to flock back to you on this one. So in the midst of everything going on, I mean, obviously it's key for an individual's mental health to separate themselves. How do you encourage people that, one, that's okay to do that, and two, what are the steps that folks can take to make that happen?
Right. So I think for people working from home, we talked about boundaries, and one of those has to be a physical space. So I would definitely create a physical space that is your area. This is where you work. And not only for the children to know that's separate, that's the workspace, and we don't go within that workspace, or if they are allowed to, when that's allowed. But also for the parent to have space that is their own, that's not work, to have a separate space for just themselves too. Because I think the boundaries get, very overlapping right now with working from home. And so it's really good to have your own space too, that you can take a break from work and from family life just to be able to reflect for yourself, do some meditation, do some stretching, just have that time to just kind of rest your brain and your emotions and everything that goes along with that too. It's really, it's actually critical. And some people feel like they just don't have time for that. But even for 5 minutes to be able to breathe is really important.
So Brianna, does that need to go in the schedule?
That should go on the schedule, yeah. Deidre, I actually had a colleague tell me she transitioned from working in the office to having to be home all day long doing teletherapy on the computer on Zoom all day long. And Zoom brain is a thing. It's a hard thing, but it's a thing. And so she told me in order to decompress, she physically had to take herself at the end of the day or the end of her last session, and she, from her own home, she went out to her vehicle and sat in the vehicle, turned on like the music or something like that, and sat there for about 5 minutes, just kind of decompressing from the day, taking in her space, taking in some fresh air, taking in whatever she needed right at that moment. So very much, Kelly, getting removed from your work life and making a transition to home life is really important. And even more, with everybody, many people starting to work from home, being able to have that workspace, like you said, but also setting that boundary for yourself. I'm not going to re-enter the computer or my email until 7 o'clock the next morning, 8 o'clock, whenever I'm supposed to log in, because since we're working from home, we may or may not feel that we have an obligation to be available much more often. But in theory, we want to keep to a standard 8-hour workday, whatever that workday, take yourself out for lunch. If you were someone who liked to go out for lunch, within obviously safety precautions now with COVID, take yourself out to lunch, or at least take yourself out to pick up something for lunch if you're someone who enjoys getting out of the house. Kids kind of change that. If your kids are able to be home by themselves for 30, 45 minutes, go out, do something, take a walk during the day, just like you might during the office hours. You need a minute away from that physical office space. So taking care of yourself involves setting those boundaries from that physical office space and getting fresh air, getting those breaks, just as you would if you were actually in the office.
Yeah. Lindsay, did you want to add something?
Yeah, well, I was thinking what Brianna's talking about. I was talking with parents of middle schoolers just a week ago, and we were talking about what we need during times of imbalance and uncertainty. And the list that the middle schoolers came up with was as diverse as they were, right? Some kids needed some quiet time. Some kids needed somebody to process with. Some kids needed sleep. Some kids needed a distraction or a game to be playing. And so I think for us to recognize what we need to fill up and also and pursue those things, whether it's that walk around the block or going out to the car, imagining that commute, whatever the thing might be. When we know what we need to fill back up and we pursue those things, it also models and gives permission to kids to ask for what they need so that they can also get what they need to fill back up.
That's an interesting perspective. All right, so we're gonna move on to question number 2. Are y'all ready? And this one is coming from Angie, a familiar face to so many of us.
Being a parent in the midst of a pandemic is stressful, let alone when you're a planner. With the uncertainties of school, it'd be really... Yeah, I'll be there in just a minute. Just one more minute. With the uncertainty of school and what it can look like day to day in terms of just different in a household, what advice do you have, not just for parents, but for the entire family to get through this unprecedented time?
Awesome. Thank you, Angie, for submitting that question. So the question here, and you're going to see it on the screen, how can parents manage the stress of uncertainty for themselves and for children? And for this question, we're going to go to you first, Lindsay. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, thanks, Deidre. I think for this, I actually start where Kelly did for the last one. Identifying what you do have control over is so important in this time of uncertainty. We don't have control over other people's behavior. We don't have control over how the virus reacts, but we can create structures and rituals within our own homes. Coming at this from a faith perspective, spiritual health isn't the same as mental health, but it can help support it. So if you are a person of faith, you might create rituals at home that involve prayer, music, reading sacred stories or any stories, breathing and meditation practices, maybe a gratitude practice where you're going for a walk around the block and noticing the things that you're grateful for together, taking that special time to connect and notice. And I think maybe another thing that could be part of that ritual is just acknowledging that every day we are learning how to do new things and learning how to do old things in new ways. And that's hard, but we can celebrate every time we learn to do the new thing. And just acknowledging that and celebrating that, I think, can be a ritual that can lift us up instead of feeling the weight of all those new things we have to learn how to do.
And Dr. Hill, I can imagine that a lot of this stress comes from, fear of making a mistake, fear of not being able to meet the mark or the expectation. How do people deal with that? How do they give themselves grace during this time, especially when maybe the employers aren't giving them grace?
Right. And that's, what I was thinking with this question is flexibility. And that flexibility is really for ourselves too, to give ourselves permission that this really isn't the time to try to excel, to our highest goals that we have, whether that's with family or work or, whatever personal goals. This is the time to focus on what we need to do, again, kind of back to the basics again, but being flexible with all the change that's happening and knowing that is going to be stressful for us. And because of that, it's even more important to take care of ourselves. But I think also an important part of this question is being open, which does make us be vulnerable, which is kind of scary for some people. But I think it's so important right now, just because we're all going through this, if we can be open and vulnerable to our employer or to our family and let them know, I know I'm really doing my best right now. I know it might not be exactly what you're hoping for, but I really am doing my best. And, letting them know. So I know I sometimes get interrupted. Fortunately, it's not much because my kids are a little more independent, they're a little bit older now, but I can imagine for people with younger children, there are going to be more interruptions. So I think being open about that and letting people know, listen, I have, children that I'm trying to do school with too at the same time. So sometimes I might get interrupted. I try to keep that, to a minimum, but I'm just letting you know, just in case that happens, giving people a heads up first and being open about that. And I found that people are extremely understanding with that because it's happening to them too, most likely.
Any ways that any additional steps, Brianna, that you think that people can take to help manage some of the stress?
Sure. I think, self-awareness is a really, really big thing right now, and just being aware of your surroundings, of how you feel, what might be triggering some of those things. Uncertainty is the world we live in right now. I think we've always lived in uncertainty, though. A lot of folks, what are my kids going to do? Are they going to be successful? We still have all of those same uncertain facts that you hope will fall into place, but we just have the added uncertainty of what this world's going to look like in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month, and so on. And so one of the biggest self-awareness tools or things that you can do is be aware that uncertainty does not have to equal fear. Uncertainty is is just not knowing what the future holds or what the next day holds, whereas fear is the response to it. And with fear, we start to create bad behaviors. We start to impose our beliefs on others because we are trying to take back that control. And Kelly's right on. We do need to take control of the things we can control, but that doesn't mean we have to act out of fear or out of anger towards what's going on in the world, or out of, we don't have to act out of feelings. We need to act with logic. And so once you understand that the uncertainty is present, increasing your communication skills, recognizing that we can't control whether ourselves or our child may or may not be sick this fall. One of the most uncertain facts, especially for working parents right now, is what do I do if my child gets sick or I get COVID and they have to quarantine for 2 weeks or whatever the CDC standards is at that time. And so nobody knows, then they have to take off of work. And so that doesn't have to be fear-based though. If you're able to create plans, routine, have mostly those plans in place though, having talked with your employer, having talked with teachers, what does this look like if my child is ill? Hopefully they're quite understanding and allow time for recovery, but also what's the transition plan when they start to feel better and are still within that quarantine period. So using self-awareness to understand what your triggers are. If you're watching the news excessively and you know that after watching the 5 o'clock news every day, you're angry and irritable, understanding that might be your trigger, and maybe it's best if we turn that off, or you watch it or read about it so that you can control what information you're getting. Maybe you have a preferred news source or a preferred writer. You can control what information you're taking in. You can control how much of it you're taking in. So finding little ways to tweak whatever is creating those feelings within you is really, really important as we continue through all of this uncertainty.
How do we identify if we're being triggered? Is it uncharacteristic responses to things? Like, how do we know that something's wrong, something needs to be adjusted?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Deidre. Sometimes you'll hear, one of the most primary ways of identifying that is a friend or family member or colleague might ask you once or twice or a little more often, are you okay? Is there something bothering you? And most of the time, our normal response is, yeah, I'm fine. What's up? But in reality, if we have multiple people approaching us saying that, then there may be a greater problem. If our kids start misbehaving a little bit more. Kids are often a first line response to how the parents are responding to whatever's going on in their life. So when your kids increase from or change their behavior from whatever they might be used to, it's important to check in with them and find out what's creating that behavior. Was it something that is in their environment at school, or is it something at home that you can control? And then also just taking that time, as we've all discussed earlier in this panel, to give yourself that moment, give yourself that opportunity to have space around you to be able to take in your own feelings, your own needs, and really address that self-care portion so that you can just take that deep breath or take that walk or that fresh air and just decompress whatever's going on in your mind. And that's kind of how you can find out if you have some of those triggers. But like I said, friends, family, and coworkers are probably your most important source of information when it comes to that.
Lindsay, I want you to get in on this one before we move to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what Brianna's saying. I think knowing yourself, knowing those triggers, paying attention to how you feel and how the people around you are responding to you. All of that is so important. And I do think right now putting parameters or structures around our news intake is, do you turn the news on first thing in the morning, or is there a morning playlist that helps you roll into your day in a different way? Are you watching the 5 o'clock news, or are you watching news right before you go to bed at night? I think putting some parameters around that so that we can unplug a little bit so that we can fill back up is just so important.
Sounds like there needs to be some balance, right? Because I think so many folks feel obligated to know what's going on in the world, to know what's going on in their community. But them knowing those things, it sounds like could be negatively impacting their ability to parent or to work or to simply just be a human being in this space free from stress.
Well, I think there's, I think because we are in sometimes a reactive news cycle or a cycle that kind of wants to tell us there's something new that we have to pay attention to every minute of every day. I mean, if you watch the news at 5 and you don't turn it on again until 8 the next morning, you will probably still be informed and up to date about what's going on in your community.
Good point.
You might have time to check in and just make sure that you and your family are also doing all right and you're not kind of participating in that doom scrolling that can really suck us in and suck our energy.
Before we go on to the next question, real quick, Dr. Hill, some people escape to social media. And I just want to talk really quickly about how the impact of social media might have something to do with people's ability to, be sound mentally in the space.
That's a really good point, because even pre-pandemic, there was a lot of research coming out that was showing, especially with adolescents, that was showing, higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression when they were actively, when they were too active on social media. So we already knew that. And so now in the pandemic, when I think people are, especially teenagers and young adults probably are getting more on social media than ever before, it raises those rates, right? They're not having as much social connection that they're used to, that they need. They're not getting outside as much. They're not, a lot of the things that we need that they're not doing, that they're supplementing with social media, that's just skyrocketing some of those issues. So I think it is important, and especially if you get your, a lot of people get their news sources from the social media sites too. And so just being bombarded all the time. So I think being able to set that boundary for yourself too, or helping your children to do that, to really limit the times that you are on social media and limit what you're doing on there so that you can just have a better balance for yourself.
Awesome. All right, now we'll go on to the next question. This is Keith.
I'm a divorced father of 3. My question for the panel is around managing the emotional and mental changes that come with being a full-time parent one week to a part-time the next.
So this question here is really speaking to co-parenting, if you will. How can I manage with the emotional and mental changes that come with being a full-time parent one week and a part-time parent the next week? Lindsay, we're going to start you on this question.
All right.
I'm sorry. This one, Brianna, we're starting with you on this question. I'm sorry, my mistake.
No problem.
Yeah, Deidre, I'll be happy to share. It's hard. Parenting's hard enough, especially when you add in co-parenting roles or attempting to shuffle who's home that week, whether it's between households, same household, whatever it might be. It takes a big toll on the emotional and well-being of any parent. One of the biggest decisions every parent has to wake up to right now is, does my child feel well enough to go to school? And is it allergies? Is it a cold? Or is it COVID? And so having to make that decision alone is a giant weight on the shoulders of folks, because making the decision of, does my child have COVID because they have a slight runny nose right now, impacts so many more people this day and age than it did last year. So it's tough. There's a lot of emotional pressure put on parents for decision making with their children every day, and so managing this challenge is one that, again, balance is a recurring word that we have. Routine is another, and schedules. But adult time alone, it's important for parents, whether they're married and co-parenting well together, whether they're step parents and they're attempting to co-parent from a distance, or divorced home attempting to co-parent from a distance. It's important that they all still make time for themselves. So many parents do a great job of putting their children first, their needs first, attempting to muddle through the technology that the kids have at this point, and they put their own needs on the back burner. And with all of the added stress of what the world is, what's going on in the world right now, whether it's political, whether it's COVID, the health of their own friends and family, all the stuff we're bombarded with in the news, it's important to make sure to have that adult time, whether you make sure a routine, the children are in bed at the same time every night. If you have a little bit older one or a adolescent, maybe you ask them for a little bit of quiet time, or you send them away to read a book for 30 minutes or so before bed. But finding that opportunity to reconnect with your friends and your family, whether it's at 8 o'clock at night, or you schedule a girls' night, a boys' night, a family night that the cousins get together and the adults get together, just finding that time to address your own mental health needs is incredibly important for adults getting through the emotional challenges of co-parenting one week and full-time parenting other weeks.
Sounds like we need to create opportunities to build relationships in a challenging way and in a safe way as well. Dr. Hill, you have anything on this one?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. One is, I think it's really important to create a space for the family to talk about some of these feelings, because everybody's having a lot of emotion right now. So just creating some time and some space to be able to do that and to validate that this is hard, right? So just being able to kind of talk about that together and know that you're kind of all experiencing those same things, and that that's normal right now. And it's normal to be, really frustrated with the situation, that you're not allowed, you can't do these things that are important to you and that you really want to do. And I think too, again, this is not the time to work on excelling per se, but like you kind of expect children to regress at this time. So we've been doing this for a long time. There's a lot of disappointment. There's, so you almost expect some regression, and being able to understand that and have some empathy for them and what they're, trying to put ourselves into their shoes and the things that they're missing, and just the difficulty this is right now. So, and I'm not saying, you still need the limits and the boundaries and things like that. That's still very important, but just to have some empathy for them as well, and to be able to validate those feelings. And I think something that was said a little bit earlier too, but really being able to ask for help, whether that's from, your your extended family members, or your neighbor, or your church, to get counseling if that's needed. There are resources out there to be helpful to people, because this is overwhelming sometimes. So just knowing too that there are people out there that want to help and are available to do that.
Lindsay, I want to piggyback off of something Dr. Hill just said around, students regressing. Parents, many of our parents that have students in the household right now, we're not trained teachers, and they're not getting the benefit of what the value of a teacher may have. And so there could be some steps back. And I'm sure parents sometimes feel like that every step that the child takes backwards is a reflection on their parenting. How do people come to terms with that? And not just do it, how do parents come to terms with it, but not just do it on their own, but involve the child? Because the child, like you said before, they have needs. They may see that they're regressing, and they may have challenges with that.
Yeah, I think acknowledging that no one is alone in this, right? I think sometimes it can get it's easy to fall into a I'm falling behind sort of mentality. And everyone in the world is actually dealing with this right now in one form or another. We are all managing through this pandemic the best that we can. I think one thing that can be really helpful when you notice that kind of regression, or you feel like you're slipping back or losing ground, is having a conversation about a time you made it through a hard thing before. You know, what helped? How did you make it through something before? I think sometimes when those emotions get overwhelming, it can feel like this is going to be forever. And so remembering a time in the past where you were able to make it through a challenge and what helped you do that can remind you that you have the skills and the tools to make it through a challenge, and maybe can give you footing to take the next step forward, even if you feel, and maybe especially if you feel like you're slipping back in this moment.
So are you suggesting that people share these times with their children?
Yes.
Times where maybe they had difficulty?
Yeah, wonders, yeah.
Awesome. And I can imagine how some, people want their children to believe that they're superheroes and they can accomplish anything and everything. But perhaps a part of being a superhero is letting a child know that at some point in time, mom or dad was having a difficult time and this is how we got over it, and you can do it too.
Yeah.
That's good. I love that. All right, let's go to the fourth question. Y'all ready?
Ready.
Last one, and then we're going to open it up for audience questions. Audience, please put your questions in the Q&A or the chat if you have them. This is Lindsay.
Reports are showing that women are bearing the brunt of childcare during the pandemic. What is your advice for women who are balancing parenting while dealing with their own challenges in the workplace?
So this question is specific to women in the workplace and balancing parenting in the workplace. And I want to premise our discussion on these statistics that recently came out. Last month, 617,000 women left the workforce, compared to 78,000 men. And it's estimated that 1 in 4 women right now are considering leaving the workforce. That is a big deal, coupled with this challenge. And I just am gonna start with Lindsay on this one, but I want us to spend a little bit of time on this one because this is shifting a culture, the way these statistics read it. And Lindsay's question has a lot to do with these stats. Brianna? I'm seeing Lindsay and Lindsay's question, but Brianna's answering it.
So
Lindsay, you're in the middle. I always see your smiling face.
The statistics are right on, and the question is incredibly valid right now. Women do carry an unbelievable amount of both the tangible and intangible requirements of the home life and even of work life. It's well known that women are more prone to anxiety than others as well, which adds to their negative belief system that maybe they're not good enough, they're not doing enough, they're not carrying enough of their share, all of those things, whether again it's at work or at home. At work, that anxiety sometimes can get even worse because you're competing day in and day out with oftentimes men that are looking for advancement just as well as you may be looking for advancement. And so when you feel like you have to take a day off because of a child issue, it feels like it's a bigger setback than maybe it is, just depending on the workplace. So balancing all of this, balancing work, balancing parenting, remaining in the workforce is incredibly challenging right now. But again, we'll go back, routine, that keyword routine is important. But more importantly, I think it's important to communicate with those around you. One of the panelists, I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it was, but said earlier on too, that asking for help or communicating your needs with those around you is often incredibly well received. Asking a friend, a family member, for pickup times. If that's what they can do and your child needs picked up at a certain time, ask them for that help. If you have a family member that excels at math and you have a 12-year-old kid that is just struggling and basic algebra is hard enough for you, get that friend involved and have them attempt to help walk through that homework with the child. But communicate with one another, communicating with your employer oftentimes and letting them know, here's our situation, here's what I would like to happen in the future if this issue presents, what do you think? Or if you don't have a plan or you're very anxious about that future event, brainstorming with your boss or colleagues to make sure that there is a plan in place can help create balance as well, because once that event happens, there's already a plan there and it doesn't go into chaos with everybody trying to manage through. And then if the event never happens, that is just a positive as well. So communication, asking for help are two of the most important things. Don't be afraid to ask these kiddos to help you around the house too. They are willing. They just don't see problems the same way that women do in particular. And so asking kids to fold towels in the laundry for the younger ones, folding full clothes, both the adults and the siblings, is not unheard of. Significant others, particularly sometimes the boys, don't always see the mess the girls see, and so they don't see that sink full of dishes. But as a mom or anybody in the home, if you just ask, hey, would you mind doing this tonight? I'd really appreciate it. Most likely that sink full of dishes will get done, and that will be one thing you don't have to do. So don't be afraid to ask, whether it's the kids, whether it's the adults in the home. Ask for that help when you need it.
Dr. Hill, I can imagine we've talked a little bit about this, and you mentioned it before, in line with Brianna asking for help. That presents it presents a position of vulnerability that so many are not accustomed to, and they're uncomfortable with.
Right.
But what's the worst that could happen?
Right. Exactly. They might not be able to, but you can ask someone else. And I think, women are so programmed right now to think that we have to be able to do it all. And I have to admit, I'm totally guilty of this myself. But, trying to do well in the workforce and keep your families thriving and, just be able to do it all. And it's hard in a regular kind of world, but right now we just have to get help. We have to ask. And I think too, that women really need to be kind and forgiving of themselves, because we have such high expectations in general for ourselves that we might not be able to do at this time in survival mode, and just kind of keeping things as stable as we can, that we need to be kind and forgiving of ourselves. And if we can't do things just perfectly like we would like to, then that's okay. It's still gonna be okay. And Brianna had mentioned that women tend to be at higher risk for anxiety, and so I would say a good strategy too is for people to remember that a thought is just a thought. So just because we have the thought that something horrible is gonna, like, what if I ask for help? Oh my goodness, what if they think less of me? Well, that's just a thought. That's not a fact. That's not what's happening right now. So mindfulness strategies focus on accepting what's happening right now in this moment without making any judgment on it. And I think that is critical for women to use too. So, and that includes our feelings too. Like, I'm feeling really scared right now to ask for help, but this is the situation. And it doesn't mean I'm not a good mom. It doesn't mean I'm not a good worker. It just means I can't make all this happen right now. I need help. That's the fact. There's no judgment on it. And then to be able to ask for that help, accept those feelings. Those feelings are okay. That's just what I'm experiencing right now. There's no judgment on it.
I have a question here. Because I work from home, I feel like I have to check my phone far more often, since people can't just walk up to my desk. But being on several devices at once can be very draining. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good point. And I would communicate with the people at work your preferred method, or maybe you make an agreement that you will check your phone every hour or something like that, whatever seems reasonable to you, so that you can put it away to be able to really focus and do some work, and then meet that. So whether it's checking email, or checking your phone, whatever you need to do, but just again, communicating that to your coworkers is really important. And checking with them, does that seem to work? Will that be enough time if I check it every hour or every 2 hours, whatever you think would be a good amount of time, to establish those new boundaries for yourself, because you need that to be able to stay focused and to work well without being too drained. But good for you for noticing that was happening. That's important.
Lindsay, I'm going to flip this question a little bit, because you were earlier talking about modeling behavior for children. Sometimes we have to model behavior for our colleagues and how we treat our colleagues. Can we speak to that a little bit? Because we've talked about giving ourselves grace and setting our expectations more realistically for ourselves. It's probably something we should probably do for others too, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I think this question gets to something that I think all of us have experienced, as we have maybe different hours in the office or more from home. And, the little meetings that happen when you can pop into somebody's office or before or after the meeting, that just doesn't happen in the same way. And so we have to be much more intentional. I can't have a 2-minute conversation here. I have to either figure out how the best way to communicate will be. And I also have to let my colleagues know when I'm going to be there and when they can count on me. And I think setting those boundaries, modeling that communication, and then also modeling grace is really, really important. And I don't know, sometimes you set up a Zoom so that you can start 15 minutes early or go 15 minutes late and have the extra part of the meeting just to chat and catch up that you might have if you were able to be in the same space. But being aware of and making space for all of that, I think, is really important.
Any thoughts, Brianna?
I really like Lindsay's idea. I don't know if she's ever done it or been able to model it or had it modeled to her, but setting up that extra time before or after a meeting to be able to catch up. Working from home has so many of its own challenges. One of which is the lack of social interaction that our work family used to provide to us. And so getting creative, finding innovative solutions to problems are important. And one of those might be a little bit of extra time, but increasing that communication, echoing Dr. Hill and Lindsay's suggestions, that just finding ways to increase communication through appropriate methods is important. If that means a brief meeting every day to touch base, instead of having to send multiple emails throughout the day, getting information from everybody, or one group email that is always just kind of going and you catch up, whatever it might be, finding creative solutions so that it works for you. And if you find it's not working, share that with somebody so that you can continue to adapt and adjust to meet your needs as well as everybody else's.
Awesome. Well, these have been some amazing observations. Thank you to each and every one of you all for adding so much value and providing tools to our parents and perhaps our aunties listening to this discussion. First, before we go to closing remarks, I'm going to give you all 60 seconds when we do these closing remarks, and think, if you had just one moment to talk to a parent for 60 seconds, what would you tell them? What information would you give them, knowing that they're struggling at this point in time? But before we go there, we'd like to invite you to attend the rest of the Lifting the Veil Life Interrupted series. Next up is on October 29th, and that conversation is about effective employee/employer tools. And that's on Thursday, October 29th. The next one is diversity relationship goals. And that one's on Thursday, November 19th from 12 to 1. You can register at dsmmagazine.com/lifting-the-veil-2020. So we also want to make sure that you're subscribing. If you have not subscribed to DSM, we invite you to do that. You can get connected to free newsletters like DSM Weekly and Wealth, and a new statewide newsletter as well. And of course, we'd also like you to subscribe to DSMIA, the Iowa publication as well. So subscribe. These are the options for subscription right here on the left. And you can visit dsmmagazine.com to do that, or iapublication.com as well. And this is just going to be opportunities for you to get information that you may not see. Good reading information to read before bed or when you wake up in the morning. So now let's go back to the group for some closing thoughts. You got 60 seconds to grapple with a parent, to encourage them. Who wants to go first?
I will.
Go.
60 seconds. Okay, so cut me off when I need to. Okay, I would say focus on what you can control. There's a lot that's unpredictable right now. Focus on what you can control, accept the fact that there are many things we can't. Make the routines as predictable as possible for yourself and for your family. Be kind and forgiving of yourself, and accept that we can't do it all right now. And save some time to be able to process all of the emotions and everything that's going on right now for ourselves and for our children. And I think I'm going to stop there.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Lindsay, Brianna, who wants to go?
I'll jump in.
All right, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, Brianna, you can have the last word. I think acknowledge it's hard. It is hard. And we are finding ways through. Asking for help is not only okay, it's important, it's good. You're not alone, and seek the help you need. And remember the ways that you've gotten through in the past. Remembering those things, lifting those things up, and leaning on those things will help you and your kids as we keep making our way through. And trust that we will.
It's good. All right, last but not least, Brianna.
This is my favorite part of counseling sessions, being able to send people away with positive thoughts and encourage them. So the positive thoughts that I would have, or the closing remarks, would be you're not failing. You can't fail at something that there's no standard set. Every day we live in COVID, every day that we live with this new hybrid model of school, online schooling, whatever it might be, there's absolutely zero standard set forth. You are the standard. And so whatever you do is not wrong. Whatever works for your family, it works. You keep doing it because every single family is different. If you have a friend that's doing it a different way, it really doesn't matter, because if it's working for your family, you do it. If it's successful, you do it. But don't forget along the way to ask for help. Don't forget your friends. Don't forget the importance of social. Don't forget the importance of your own mental health. Whatever you're needing, take care of that. Whatever your children are needing, find ways to take care of that. But you can't be a successful parent without taking care of yourself as well. So through all of it, make sure that you are feeding into your own self-care. And with that, there's no way that you can fail.
Thank you all for your inspiring remarks. I'm not a parent, and I have gotten some incredible tools from this discussion. Before we end, I want to thank you, our sponsors, once again, our presenting sponsor, Delta Dental, supporting sponsor, Clyde Behavioral Health / Mercy One. We also want to thank the sustaining sponsors, Employee and Family Resources of Iowa, Make It Okay, Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center, and NCMEC. Thank you all for tuning into this program. I hope that you garnered some tools from this discussion, but more so than anything, I hope that you understand that you're okay and you can get through this. And the folks today have given you some tools, and I'm sure that you're going to read about more tools that you could possibly utilize. But more so than anything, just remember, set your boundaries, communicate, and engage your families as much as you all possibly can, because you all are in this together. You deserve each other, and life will go on after COVID. Thank you again for tuning in.